You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again. Today, we have another amazing show. We're going to talk to an amazing person, Tim Heale. He is all about great things. He has a book that we're going to be talking about later in the show. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about his amazing military career. And he is someone that I think is going to be very interesting to talk to on the show because he's someone that does a lot of things. But most importantly, he's done amazing things in his life. He's done things with leadership, building communities, and also just being an inspiration. So first and foremost, I just want to welcome you to the show, Tim, and say, how you doing, man?
Thank you very much for having me on, Shmar.
So, man,
it's a pleasure to be here.
I want to thank you for taking time in your schedule being with us today, but I want to learn everything about your military career because you're from the UK, and yep. I would love for you to give us the backstory of what got you inspired to join the military and just your journey.
Well, it started when I couldn't get into an agricultural boarding school at the age of 10. I failed the entrance exam fairly miserably, to be honest. So I thought I'd go and join the army. And the first time I went to join the army, I was only 14 3/4, which is the earliest you can go and take the test to join the army in Great Britain. And I failed that miserably as well. And the recruiting sergeant, he says to me, son, if you can't read and write proper like what I does, you've got no chance of getting in the army. You better go and buck your ideas up and learn something. So I did. I went away that weekend. I gave myself a really stern talking to. Went to school the following week on a Monday, and I went to every class. Now, half of the teachers thought I was a new student because I'd done an awful lot of bunking off. Anyway, I knuckled down, worked really hard for the next 6 months or so, went back with a friend to the recruiting office. We took the test. Recruiting officer says, boys, you do the test. I've got to pop out and do something. So my mate gave us a few of the answers, and lo and behold, I managed to get a place as a junior soldier in the Royal Anglian Regiment. And I joined the army on the 5th of August, 1974, and I never looked back.
And when you got out, what was some of the things that will never fade away as far as things that you learned with your journey being in the military? What were some of the valuable lessons that you learned while you was in?
Well, the British Army worked to a set of values and standards, and I've been working to those all my life. I mean, I left the army on the 4th of April, 2018. So I did a long and, say, fairly distinguished career. Although I didn't get the Long Service and Good Conduct Medal, and that's for a reason. I got caught. I only got caught once, but I got caught. So, and that prevented me from getting that medal. But I got a lot of other medals. But those values and standards are key to making me the man that I am today, I guess. They teach me respect, integrity, loyalty, courage, discipline. So I've lived by those all my life. And those are lessons I take with me, and those are the lessons I try and pass on. I try and be an inspiration to other people. In fact, I'll give you a little story. Last week I was at a veterans meeting here where I live, and there was a camera crew came along because last year we had a national census, and one of the questions on there is whether you was a veteran and where you lived. And there's two hotspots in the United Kingdom where there's a big cluster of veterans. One is up in the north of the country in a place called Richmond, and the other one is in Gosport, where I live. So there's a lot of veterans in the town. So this camera crew was there to sort of talk with the the CEO of the Veterans Outreach Support, who is this charity that looks after veterans, not just veterans with need, but just generally looking after veterans, trying to keep us in touch with each other. The camera crew asked if they wanted if any of us wanted to talk. So I put my hand up and cut a long story short, they came to my studio and had an interview with me. And on the nightly news, nationwide news, this is, that piece went out shortly after. A guy up in the Midlands of the UK contacted me and said he was really having trouble. He didn't know where to turn. I have a friend up in that neck of the woods. I put them in touch. He's now helping him out. So from that one interview, we know we've helped one person, and that's possible. That's my mission in life, is to help other veterans that are suffering from mental health problems, that are suffering from PTSD particularly. So from that point of view, it was a real Billy bonus and a real buzz to get this guy contact me and to be able to help him. So I'm really, really proud of that one incident. So for me, it's all about helping others. And that's all I've done all my life, really, help others.
Once again, you listen to I'm Refocused Radio. We're talking to our special guest, Tim Heale, and his amazing military career. He also has a podcast. You see on his shirt, the Tim Heale Podcast. He interviews amazing people as well and having them share their extraordinary stories. He also wrote a book that we will be talking about later in the show. The book is called Pod Match Host Mastery, a guide to finding in-string guests and growing your show by learning from top Podmatch host members. So that's something you guys want to stick around for. But I want to go back to the point where you talk about veterans, because here in the United States, we deeply care about veterans, those who serve. And I'm sure it's the same feeling where you are as well. What are some of the programs that are available? Because you mentioned about that there's programs that you tended to. What are some of the programs out there that helps veterans to get the help that they need?
Well, in the UK, there are roughly around, it fluctuates a little bit, but there's roughly around about 2,000 charities that are just set up to help veterans. They come and go a little bit, but there are some of the larger ones that help all the time, like Help for Heroes, Blesma, which is the limbless guys. There's just trying to think of Combat Stress. There's the VOS, which is the Veterans Outreach Support, which is one I go along to. We have another one where we're just a bunch of veterans that meet up called Buns and Banter once a month. There's an outreach across in Portsmouth once a month, and they have lots of different agencies come in. So the Veterans UK come in. There's SAFA comes in, which is the Soldier Service Airmen's Association that help veterans. So there's lots and lots of help out there, and it just needs that little bit of encouragement to go and seek that help. And the main thing is recognising it in yourself. If you're not feeling 100%, if you're not feeling comfortable, have a look at yourself. If you can recognise in yourself that you've got a problem, you're halfway there to solving it or helping it. And I think that's the key: is recognise that you've got a problem and then seek the help. So many veterans end up on the streets. They end up in broken relationships because they try and bottle it up, and bottling up is the worst thing you can possibly do. Recognise that you've got a problem, speak to people about it, talk to your loved ones, and that's the real key is talk to your loved ones. They're the ones they're the ones that will support you through thick and thin. But if you try and bottle it up, and you're just making a rod for your own back, really. And that's what we're trying to get across is for veterans to understand that they are different to civilians, and civilians don't understand an awful lot of the time what a veteran's been through. And I had that problem myself. That's one of the things I spoke about on this interview. I had a little bit of a wobble a while ago where I needed a little bit of support. I went to the doctor to get referred. He referred me on to a local counsellor. Went and saw the counsellor. Didn't understand the military mindset. Wasn't an awful lot of help for me. Yes, he was a great professional, but he didn't understand my problems. I ended up speaking to some friends and some mates, and now I'm okay. But it took that little bit of a catalyst to go and seek some help, and I recognised in myself, because my last job in the army, funny enough, I was a welfare officer for 8 years in London Central Garrison. So I was a coordinator for PTSD in the garrison, and I was looking after people's welfare, so I understood some of the complex issues that guys get. So, and it wasn't until I left the military, and I've been out a couple of years, that it finally come home and sort of bit me in the backside, should we say. It caught up with me.
Yeah, I like what you said earlier about not allowing things to bottle up, because whether you're military or non-military, I think people can get stuck in a way where they don't release things that they need to release. And I think it's healthy to, if you do need help, go seek that professional as soon as you can, because it's like you can't light someone's candle if yours is not lit. And you have to deal with those things so that way you can be a positive impact in your community. And that's what you're doing. You're doing that with, you have a book that we're going to talk about later, but your podcast, the Tim Heale Podcast, you kind of explore that same thing. What is some of the type of guests that you search for to get on your show?
Well, just take you back a little bit, how I actually got into the podcast thing in the first place. I was working on Ancestry, and I came across my great-grandfather, who was a chief stoker in the Royal Navy. And he lived about 3 miles from where I live now. He died back in 1930. When we got into lockdown, I was drinking a little bit too much for my own good. And I sort of thought, I need to do something to be just cure the boredom. I thought, well, my granddad's story is lost forever. It's never going to be able to be told because it's gone. If I don't tell my story, that's going to be gone as well. So that's how I started the podcast. So I started recording my life. So there's 24 half-an-hour episodes of my life. So that any of the listeners out there that are suffering from insomnia, get them to have a listen to that. Put them to sleep in minutes. If not, it might give you a few nightmares.
That's a good one.
But I got to the end of my life, and I did a couple of extra episodes of more in-depth stuff that I'd done. And I thought, we're still in lockdown. What do I do now? Well, why don't I start telling other people's stories? So we leave a legacy for future generations. So the first person I turned to was my mother, and I got her story. And I've gone on from there, and I'm now just released episode 148 of other people, I think, somewhere about there anyway. I think there's 240 episodes knocking around.
See, that's
and they're available on all the major podcast platforms, and there's an awful lot, I think, from number 42 onwards. They're now available on YouTube as well.
That's what I like about podcasting, because it's really interesting the wave of podcasts that are coming out, but also what you're touching on. People now have the ability to listen to all these stories from not just their own country, but basically around the world. There's so many people, so many stories of success, of failure, of wisdom, what you learn from.
I've spoken to an awful lot of military type people, but I've also spoken to a lot of other people from around the world. I've had people from Australia, I've had people from the Far East, the Middle East, Europe, and North America and Canada. Lots and lots of people, and everybody's got a fascinating story. And I have a basic format to my show where I ask people when and where they were born. I ask them about their schooling, the types of school they went to. I ask them to describe what it was like where they grew up. So we get an idea of their background, and then we look at their work life history and we run through that, and we generally pull out an awful lot of little nuggets of fantastic information. And then we'll end up talking about something that where the conversation takes us, and it's taken us some fantastic places.
Once again,
and I just love talking to people.
Once again, listen to Time Refocus Radio, talking to our guest Tim Heale, and man, the book that I promise we will get to. The title of the book that is really doing great right now on Amazon. I mean, you got great reviews.
There is.
Talk to us about this amazing book, Podmatch Host Mastery. This is something I think a lot of people who are aspiring to be a host or maybe a guest in the future, because you have another book on that.
There's an accompanying book to it as well. There's the guest Pod Mastery. In fact, I've got copies of both of them. There you go. So there's two books. They're both number one on as Amazon bestsellers. There's 16 authors that have contributed to each book. And if you're looking for, if you want to get into podcasting where you're having guests or you want to be a host, sign up for Podmatch. It is a brilliant platform. It's the best pod matching platform out there. There's lots of support for it. There's I don't know, I think there's about 40,000 members and an inexhaustible amount of people that you can contact with. And it is a really good platform. So I encourage anybody, if they want to get into this game, that's where to start. Get the books, have a read up, and then go for it.
And you provide step-by-step strategies for people who pick up either one of those books to be, whether it's a better guest or to be a better host. When you have gained a lot of experience for yourself with your own platform, what's some of the core ingredients that you've been able to take away just with your experience interviewing so many different people for so many different backgrounds?
Well, one of the key things, if you're a host, the key to being a really good host is you've got two ears, one mouth, use them in that portion, listen to what the person's talking about, focus your whole attention on that person, because that's the way that you get the best out of a guest, is if you treat them that they're the only person in the world that you're listening to at that time, and really engage with what they're saying. Ask them questions, ask them meaningful questions. Don't try and fluff your way through. I have a particular way of doing it. I like to go in cold. By that I mean I have a rough idea of the person I'm going to talk to, and that's about it. And I start a conversation off. I have the basic format, and I give my 100% concentration on that person while we're talking. And it's amazing how quickly an hour will flash by, and you barely scratch the surface. but it's a natural conversation, and that's what I like about it. And I learn so much from people.
And what's amazing is, if I can share my experience with Podmatch, is there's a common thread with a lot of great guests and hosts, and you touched on them. Number one is a good listener. Number two is a person who thinks deeply about the person they're talking to. And number three is simply growing and being yourself, because the more you're yourself, the more your fingerprint touches other lives. And the more it does that, the more meaning it has. I just literally talked to someone like 30 minutes ago, and she's a life coach. And she talks about, like, okay, if there's something I can't do for a client, like, for example, she said anyone who needs therapy or anything like that, she lets them know right away, hey, before we go further with my services, you need to go see a professional in this area. And I think part of everything that we do in life is knowing what are our weak points and then what are our strong points, and knowing when to adjust. And the more we do that, the better life becomes.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And at the end of the day, it's just develop your own listening skills, because that's the key to being a good host, is having good listening skills and understanding what the person is that you're speaking to is saying. And then just to clarify things, just go over some of the stuff that you've spoken about, and it leaves them feeling really good about themselves. It leaves you feeling good about yourself. And when it goes out as a podcast, people listening will connect with that. And my podcast at the moment, I'm just approaching, I think, around about 16,000 downloads in the last 2.5 years.
That's awesome.
With I think it's about 240 episodes that have gone out. Somewhere around about that.
That's not bad at all.
I don't really check the numbers that often.
That's great results, because I think when people understand exactly what the host is trying to deliver, now they know exactly what to expect when they hear new guests. They know that some kind of value is going to come across from the other person who is basically a guest in the house. But someone gave me some really good advice. And when I first started, I was like, worried about the wrong things. You know, how many downloads am I getting? How many people am I reaching? You know, all this stuff that, you know, is starting to become, you know, kind of unnecessary at this point. But when you start focusing on who can I help? Who can I inspire? How can I get this guest to give someone a blueprint who may need that blueprint to unlock that, whatever they're stuck in, unlock that door, so that way they can grow and that they can take action steps. Okay, Tim did this, he did that, he learned from this. Boom, I'm gonna start doing that today. And then before you know it, they get to, like we touched on earlier in the show, they get to light the next person's candle and spread that light, because that's what we need in this world, is people who can share their stories and spread that light of positivity, but also real life situations that'll help them grow.
Yeah. I think the real key to take from it is don't get hung up on numbers at all. Concentrate on the quality of the content that you're pushing out. It's quite funny. I get asked quite often, who's my avatar? Who is my ideal target audience? And my answer, you'll love this, is my target audience, my avatar, hasn't been born yet.
Wow.
People think, what? Precisely that. This is what I do, is it's all about leaving a legacy for future generations. So quite often, I mean, you'll see it with your own kids, your own grandkids. They don't care what you're doing, what you've done with your life until it's too late, when you're gone. And then slightly later in life, they, well, I wish I spoke to my granddad about that, or wish I'd sort of taken a bit more notice of what my parents did. It's not until it's too late that people want to know what their relations or their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents did with their lives. And this is what it's all about. So my avatars hasn't been born yet. It's for future generations, or 50, 100 years' time, they can look back at what we did in this period of time. We can't really do it much. Yes, you can look back in history a bit and see what famous people did, but not ordinary people. And ordinary people have had some extraordinary stories. They really have. And that's the thing that I try and bring out in my podcasts.
Once again,
and generally it does. There's, some fantastic stories out there.
Once again, listen to Army Focus Radio, talking to our guest, Tim Heale. And man, we're talking about a lot of great things, not just your military career. We're talking about service. We're talking about helping people. We're talking about just treating others the way you would want to be treated. That's the golden rule right there. But the other thing is you talk about the future, and I think that's important. The next generation is, how can you paint this? They're the next one up to swing the bat, if you will. They're the next one up to take the shot, take the risk, and lead when it's time for them to be the leaders. Someone listening right now, and they're like, all right, what can I do to be a better leader?
You can't change history. You can learn from history. You can't change it. You can make history, but you can't change it. So that's the key to take. History is happening today, now. This podcast or this conversation that we have is going to be there in the annals of history, and people can look back at this in years to come and think, wow, or okay, what can we take from that? But this time period, and this is us, and when you go back 20 years, mobile phones were like massive, great big bricks. Nowadays, it's a tiny little thing. Look how technology's come on. When I was a kid, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have mobile phones. We didn't have computers. In fact, I didn't see a television until I was 12.
Wow.
So
now they can watch it.
I was born in the 50s.
Now they can watch Baby Shark now. So it's like times have changed. It's crazy. But yeah, with all that said, what I'm getting from what you just talking about is being able to adapt with time, not staying stuck. And what I mean by that is not making excuses for why you can't change. Because we can't say all of us, that's a disclaimer, but a lot of us can look for inspiration. And as someone told me last week, it doesn't matter how much inspiration I give you. It doesn't matter all the stories I tell you. It doesn't matter all the secrets I tell you towards success. What matters is what you do with it. Because until you do something, you still have nothing. Until you plant the seed, you're still looking for answers. Sometimes it just takes us to plant one seed to get the full crop. But we are so busy worrying about what if, or maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I can't change, or maybe I can't, whatever, fill in the blank. With your personal experience, what did it take for you to make that decision, to make that move, plant those seeds, and take action?
I think for me personally, it's just doing it. I think you have to be comfortable with yourself. You have to be comfortable in your own skin. Lots and lots of people don't like the sound of their own voice when they're recording. You need to get over that. You need to accept who you are. You need to love yourself, and you need to love what you're doing. The day I stop enjoying doing what I'm doing, I'll stop it. It's as simple as that. If I'm no longer enjoying what I'm doing, I'll just stop and find something else. That's the key. It's doing what you love. And I'm fortunate. I'm retired. I mean, I had 44 years in the army. I've seen and done so much, and I've taken so many different liberties. I've got a million stories I could tell. And I've just had an awesome life. And I've got no regrets. I mean, underneath this gorgeous exterior, there's an absolute train wreck going on. But I get up every day. Sometimes I struggle at getting up every day. I mean, constantly in pain. But it's just being thankful that I'm alive for another day to take some more liberties and have some more fun. And that's what I do. I mean, this is fun. I love talking to people. I love telling people about my life. I love hearing about other people's lives. And if I can just reach out to somebody in the future that listens to some of this stuff and inspires them, then I've left a legacy. And that's it. That's what I do. That's what I love. And I think that's what the driving force. And that's how I got into it in the first place, is wanting to leave a legacy for future generations.
Once again, we've been talking to our special guest today, Tim Heale, here on Refocus Radio. Man, go check out his podcast. I'm going to give that to you again. The Tim Heale Podcast. You can get it anywhere you hear one. I mean, all the platforms. That means iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, everywhere you can find one. Also get his books. He has more than one. He has some amazing ones specifically about PodMatch and all about being a better host and also being a better guest, and some of the strategic ways you can really prep yourself to not just be a super rock star on interviews, but also be a great host that can make people shine. So once again, I want to say thanks to you, Tim, for not just being on the show, but also sharing your life story and sharing the wisdom that you gain from it.
Well, I say people can find us on YouTube. If they just put in Tim Heale 9, they'll come across the channel. If they put in the podcast app, Ordinary People's Extraordinary Stories, you'll find the podcast, and they are awesome. Every single one of them is different, and every single one of them is amazing.
Well, once again, I want to say thanks to our guest, Tim Heale, for not just being a pretty cool guest, but just being down to earth and being himself. With that, I want to say thank you for your time, for spending out your busy schedule a little time with Refocus Radio.
Thank you so much for having me.